Welcome to Defeat Your Cravings, hosted by Dr. Glenn Livingston, PhD. Glenn has held his doctorate in psychology for more than 30 years and is also a former multi-million-dollar consultant to the big food industry and uses his experience to help you defeat your cravings. This show will help you to focus on dramatically reducing cravings and leave the diet mentality behind, so you can more easily and effortlessly achieve your health, fitness, and body composition goals. Please remember, no doctor-patient relationship is created via this show, and you are responsible for confirming any changes to your diet, health, or psychological routines with an appropriately licensed professional before implementing them. Now, before we get started, if you haven't yet downloaded the free smartphone app to access dozens of these recordings all in one place, as well as to avail yourself of a confidential community for support, motivation, and assistance, please visit the podcast link on defeatyourcravings.com as soon as possible. And now, here's your host, Dr. Glenn Livingston.
Hey, it's the very good Dr. Glenn Livingston with defeatyourcravings.com. I'm here with Howie Jacobson from Plant Yourself. How are you?
Hanging in. I'm excited to hear what you got for today.
I know you're kind of sick and dying with a sinus infection. I'm really sorry, buddy. And you're a real trooper for wanting to do this anyway. I offered a couple of times just so everybody knows I'm not a mean person. Howie likes doing this. It's a good distraction, I guess. So, Howie, I have it's kind of an interesting rationalization, or we call it a squeal in our Defeat Your Cravings nomenclature. Something that your lower self says when it starts to recognize that the Defeat Your Cravings method is working, particularly when it's working and you're working with a coach in our community, kind of with a group of people. The way it's easiest to understand is from something that Groucho Marx said, which was, I wouldn't want to be part of any club that would have me as a member. Groucho Marx said, I wouldn't want to be part of any club that would have me as a member. The way this works, it has to do with self-esteem. When I practice as a psychologist, which I no longer do, I'm still licensed, but I just don't practice as a psychologist, I was usually called upon by people who wanted to improve their self-esteem. And I told them that was relatively easy because self-esteem automatically improves when you act in more esteemable ways. You know, in the Defeat Your Cravings program, we often start people with one simple rule. And after a long struggle with food, when we show them a couple of powerful techniques, they're often able to comply with one simple rule. And even after just a few days, their esteem starts to go up, often dramatically. But there's something that gets in the way. There's like something that pops up where when your self-esteem begins to improve in connection to other people, you know, a group that's providing coaching or education or support, or even just a community. If you felt badly about yourself for a very long time and you begin to feel accepted in that community, there's a part of you that says, you know what? Don't these people know I'm not worthy? And if they're so ready to accept someone like me, these people must be losers and the system must be BS. And of course, the hidden ending to that rationalization or squeal is, therefore, you should give up on this system and stop trying to use it and just binge. So it becomes a rationalization for overeating. So it becomes a motivated squeal. So we tell people that they need to be on the alert for the idea that when they start to do well, their lower self, we often call it the pig, can be your food monster, is going to say, well, Defeat Your Cravings must be a BS program full of losers if they want me as a member, or if they want you as a member, because it would be the pig talking. And if you can remember, that's just another attempt by the pig to leverage a natural phenomenon, which is part and parcel of improving your self-esteem. And then you refute that or ignore it, then you're one step closer to overcoming overeating and defeating your cravings for good. The last thing I'll say is I worked extraordinarily hard to overcome this squeal by amassing an extraordinary amount of proof and follow-up results, and we do surveys and follow-ups, and then also on an anecdotal basis from literally hundreds of members, that it's difficult for the pig to get away with this, for the lower self to get away with this. But there's still a phenomenon there, and if it starts to take hold, you can be prepared for it. You can be alerted that it might be a possibility, and you can understand what's going on and ignore it. So that's all I really wanted to say today. Do you have thoughts or questions or reasonably humorous things to say about this?
Normally, I think I would have a lot. I guess I am curious about the relationship between self-esteem in general and what you've seen in terms of success with something like this. Like it's almost like we live in a culture in which self-esteem is a very loaded concept. So for a while there, in the 80s, everything was about self-esteem. And then books were coming out, how to raise kids' self-esteem and the importance of self-esteem. And then there was a backlash. It's like, well, people should not have so good self-esteem if they suck. And maybe if you have bad self-esteem, you should work on yourself instead of working on your esteem. And over your long career that has been informed by education and practice rather than where most of us get our information about self-esteem from articles and books and social media, what's the relationship between self-esteem and self-development and success and challenging projects like changing how you eat?
There's a kind of catch-22 you can get caught up in, where most people would agree that if you act in esteemable ways and you change your behavior, that you're going to feel better about yourself, and then you create a positive snowball. But most people also believe that if they don't feel good enough about themselves, then they can't act in esteemable ways. So I can't decide that I'm not going to have chocolate during the week, or I can't put my gym clothes out every night because I hate myself, or I just feel disgusting, or I just don't have the self-esteem to do that. The question is, from which direction do you attack the problem? In the extreme, the pure self-esteem movement would have people doing affirmations. You remember the Stuart Smalley from Saturday Night Live? I'm good enough and I'm smart enough and gosh darn it, people like me. And you'd repeat that to yourself. I don't think that works in and of itself if you're not acting in esteemable ways, because there's a part of your brain that goes BS. And it's a realistic part of your brain, right? You're saying, well, I'm not doing the things that would lead me to feel like that. I'm a fit, healthy gym goer with no cardiovascular problems and 12% body fat. And in the meantime, if you look at the scale or you look at the mirror and you see that you're not, it's kind of hard to get rid of that part of the brain that says it's BS. So I'm not adverse to working on it from the other side also, working on it from the emotional side, but you have to find realistic things that your brain believes. So you could say, I am becoming a fit, healthy gym goer with lower cardiovascular risk and no blood pressure medication or something like that. I am becoming someone who puts their gym clothes out every night. That can overcome some of the reality testing, realistic part of the brain that knows that these affirmations aren't true. But the other part is to find a bar that you can clear. So if you don't think you can go to the gym 5 times a week for an hour, then could you put your clothes out every night before bed 5 times a week, right? Or if you don't think you can follow a 100% plant-based, low-fat, whole foods diet, then could you just start every day with healthy green goodness? Just start every day with a 16-ounce green smoothie, right? Can you start to crowd out the bad foods with more of the direction that you want to go? So when you lower the bar, you make life easier too. There's another piercing insight that I had at one point, which made all the difference for me personally. I realized that I'd kind of blindly accepted the notion that you had to feel good about yourself to act in esteemable ways. Like it just seemed to make sense that if you don't feel good about yourself, you're going to act in self-destructive ways, and you have to feel good about yourself to do that. And then finally it occurred to me, well, what if that's not true? Why can't I hate myself and still floss my teeth? Why can't I hate myself and still not eat chocolate? Why can't I hate myself and still go to the gym 5 times a week? I kind of laughed when I finally had that insight. Like, I'm sitting around waiting until I don't hate myself so that I can do things that aren't going to make me hate myself more. I still use toilet paper, even if I'm in a bad mood. I still brush my teeth. I still take a shower. I still show up at work, even if I'm in a really bad mood or I hate myself. So obviously I can hate myself, and hate is a strong word. I could feel badly about myself, but I could hate myself and still act as if I didn't, act like someone who took care of themselves. That was a really piercing insight for me. I had blindly accepted the notion that I had to act in accord with my feelings all the time, when the truth was your feelings just make it easier to act constructively. They're not definitive. You have the option to act in contrast to your feelings if you need to. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's helpful. The whole concept of self-esteem, I get why we have it. I get why it's a thing. It's sort of the same thing as touching the water in the bathtub and seeing, is it too hot or is it too cold? Ideally, my self-esteem is a barometer of things that are important, like, do people like me? Am I a valued member of the tribe? Can I get resources from others if I need them? Stuff like that. Ideally, that should be in accord with other people's esteem. Like, my self-esteem should probably be the average of the important stakeholders in my life esteem of me, just as a functional thing. But that's not how it works for most of us. It becomes this endless loop of mind game that we play with ourselves. First of all, to defang it a little bit and say, like, it's not even a real concept. For most of us who have struggled with low self-worth, it's basically some kind of protection against the perceived disapproval of others.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if I notice I'm fixating on my self-esteem, I can almost cut that line a little bit. Like, when you meditate, there's like a whole bunch of thoughts that are not relevant to what I'm doing right now. Just sort of poof, let them go.
Mm-hmm.
If there is some deep-seated memory, understanding, or schema about the world that shows up as I don't think very highly of myself, I think it's dangerous to try to make episodes contradict it.
What do you mean?
Like, all of a sudden to say, okay, look at me, I'm eating well. I've kept my rules for 3 weeks. We can't really expect that to contradict the irrational belief, right? Like, we might say, oh, now I've been eating really well for a month now. Why do I still have low self-esteem?
I say.
Because it's apples and oranges. It's not like I have a memory of being terrible and now I'm replacing it with this month of memories of being good. I kind of want to caution people to think about, like, when you start doing things that are objectively going to raise your self-esteem because they're good things to do and good things to have done and good for you, you still may be like, oh, but I still have these thoughts. And I think that's natural.
And so don't make self-esteem the goal.
Yeah.
Self-esteem does naturally improve when you find yourself able to do more things. Self-efficacy is more like it. Don't make that the goal. The goal is to construct your life in a way that is better tomorrow than it is today, and to improve your health and do all the things that changing your behavior is going to do for you. And there are a myriad of things that could be causing you to feel badly about yourself. And those are things you can work on with a therapist. I would say it's more like when you improve your eating behavior, you're removing one giant distraction that would prevent you from improving your self-esteem. You're being much more likely to see what's really in your way with regards to feeling good about yourself, but don't make it the primary goal. Work on the behaviors that are going to make tomorrow better than today, and work on understanding yourself. And I'm still a big fan of psychology and psychotherapy. And I always tell people that when I was 16, my dad said, you can have a car or you can go to therapy. And I chose therapy because I thought it was more valuable. And I still do. They eventually got me a car anyway. But I'm always a big fan of that. But the older I get and the longer I do this work in the realm of behavior, the more I really believe that's what's paramount in terms of improving your life. And don't get distracted by self-esteem per se.
Sounds good.
And that brings us to the end of today's broadcast of Defeat Your Cravings, hosted by Dr. Glenn Livingston. Now, if you'd like to find out more about the products and services Dr. Glenn offers to help you dramatically reduce your cravings and stop overeating in 90 days or less, please visit defeatyourcravingscoaching.com. That's defeatyourcravingscoaching.com. Thanks.